thank you so much for tuning into this webinar. Talk Matters, Oracy We Need in Classrooms Now. I hope you've had a really successful start to the return to school. And this webinar is just meant to be a time for us to reflect on oracy provision in our schools in the light of COVID and all that has happened. So just to introduce myself, I'm Hydeh. I'm a Year 5 teacher and lead practitioner at St Matthew's. I lead on geography and I'm an evidence lead in education for the research school. I'm currently working with Caroline Bilton, who's the content specialist for literacy in the primary review group for literacy. I'm an expert voice for the EEF and I'm also a Teach First ambassador. Just to share, by no means am I the expert on oracy, and I am absolutely standing on the shoulders of really fantastic people who are carrying out such meaningful work. No matter what stage we're at with our oracy curriculum, I just wanted this webinar to be a time for us to pause and reflect on the provision of talk and hopefully give you some really key strategies you can take into your classroom today, tomorrow or next half term. As a class, we are currently enjoying Mic Drop by Shana Jackson, so I just thought I'd flag that up. Before we begin the session, I just wanted to ask and pause for a moment and think about if you are wanting to develop oracy in your school, in your mat or in your trust. We want to work together with schools on an oracy project, and we want to develop skillful use of oracy strategies in schools in the West Midlands. We do plan to work with Oracy Cambridge, so it will be a research-informed project. And it is a project. There would be a series of oracy modules, but the total number hasn't yet been decided. The emphasis will be on training oracy leads who can move practice on in their schools and in their trusts. We want to build a local network of oracy specialists, and we're just looking for expressions of interest. Alongside this recording will be a link to a Google form. If you are interested in potentially working on this project, then please do register your interest. There will be a cost to schools, but we can't be specific about the costings yet. Just register your interest if it's something you would like to take forward, move forward. So just a really brief explanation about why oracy is so important to me. I never really understood the importance of being a confident speaker or being able to articulate my thoughts until I was confronted with the inability to express the knowledge I had in my head to other students at uni. So I studied French as a degree and I went to Nottingham. And I found moving to France wasn't a problem. I was able to do that. But speaking in an oral lesson at the university, I just used to absolutely dread it. I was so nervous, and the physical symptoms of my nervousness came out every time, every week for that hour. My hands would be shaking. I'd have to distract myself with something else. And of course, all that knowledge that I had in my head about how to speak French, I wasn't able to get across. And the frustration of that made me want to change and want to learn strategies to make myself a better speaker. So because I was metacognitive and I wanted to figure out strategies, I'm now able to talk confidently in front of a group. Maybe not French so much anymore, but definitely I'm able to speak confidently. So when I went into teaching in 2014, I decided that that was my mission. I was going to make sure that the children in my classroom or the children I worked with in my school, that they were confident speakers and they had the capacity to articulate what thoughts they had in their mind into the ether, into our classroom. In 2014, I saw the amazing work that DebateMate did firsthand. So I was so fortunate enough to work with them. And a few of my pupils who did the DebateMate Club actually made it to the final round in Oxford University. And just seeing that was enough of a motivator to make sure that every child I come into contact with will be able to talk. Just a little bit about the school context. So St Matthew's is an inner city school in Birmingham, and we currently have a percentage of pupil premium at 68%. And as you can see on the list on the right, there are some factors that our community do face. But we at St Matthew's do not see our children as a deficit model, and everybody in this building is motivated and wants to provide a rigorous and challenging education for all those children we have the absolute pleasure of teaching. So let's move into the aims of the session. Going to look at some of the research which underpins oracy. Through that, then we will think about some strategies which help to develop oracy in our classrooms and in our schools. And then, of course, we've got to think about the long-term implications of oracy implementation and its development in our settings. And I will be referring to the implementation guidance from the EEF to help us think about that. So I'm just going to begin with our driver, which is the national curriculum. So by the end of Key Stage 2, our pupils should be taught, and more importantly, know how to do the objectives I'm going to just list on the screen. The objectives in purple offer us objectives which can be explicitly taught and children can practice in other areas of the curriculum. So for example, if I just draw your attention to the last objective, it says that children should be able to select and use appropriate registers for effective communication. And that is a skill that can be taught and be practiced in writing. If I just draw your attention to the third bullet point, the second bullet point in purple, children should be taught to and know how to use relevant strategies to build their vocabulary. They should be able to ask relevant questions to extend their understanding and knowledge, things that we actively, explicitly teach in reading. And then, of course, this then drives into the Key Stage 3 and 4 curriculum, in that speaking and listening builds upon what Key Stage 2 children should have been taught to do. And what I find really interesting about the Key Stage 3 programme of study is that in Key Stage 3, we are building upon how we encourage children to read in primary school. For example, take the last bullet point. So children should be able to perform play scripts and poetry using role, intonation, tone, volume, mood, silence, stillness, and action to add impact. So we know that oracy is crucial to a child's development. We know how important language development is to harness from the moment the children arrive to us in nursery, and what we want to achieve are the language structures that we want to embed into the long-term memory so that children can learn to and talk through writing, and then they can then be able to reason with their talk. As evidence-informed practitioners, we are really aware of the role that cognitive science has to play when developing our learners. And Sarah Michaels and Kathy O'Connor, two researchers in this field, have done real extensive work about talk in the subject disciplines, and they put the importance of talk really succinctly for me. And they say that talk supports robust learning by boosting memory, providing richer associations, and supporting language development. And I think it's the associations that really ring true for me, because our mission is to build that schema of knowledge. So talk supports that and supports the robust learning, and it boosts the memory, makes those links between the schemas of knowledge really strong. And that quote is from their research paper, Talk Science Primer. So you need words to bring thoughts into being and sentences to manipulate the thinking. So yes, teaching vocabulary is really important, but the children have to have structures to put that vocabulary in a coherent sentence, paragraph, or speech. And that's what's going to enable them to deepen and reason their thinking. And then they can also synthesize that thinking through listening. So when they listen to their peer talking, their thoughts might change. So what tools are already at our disposal if we're thinking about the oracy provision that we are providing in schools? Communicating the curriculum by the Communication Trust is a fantastic resource. It breaks down the steps from the national curriculum into specific year groups, thinking about the I can statements and what this looks like for every child. It's a really great place to start if you're in the explore phase of your oracy provision. or in the explore phase of your oracy journey. And it's just a way of breaking down the spoken language objectives into meaningful foci for children and for teachers, most importantly. Of course, we have the invaluable toolkit the oracy framework from Voice 21 and Oracy Cambridge, and they've developed the oracy framework, which make it explicitly clear how oracy is not just about linguistic communication, but actually it's pulling together different skills that are required if we're to become communicators that can articulate thinking through learning. So just a moment to pause, and you can pause the video, of course. Where is any of that implicit or explicit in our curriculum? The lights come on and off in this room. Okay. So I'll be drawing upon work of two researchers in this field, Robin Alexander and Lauren Resnick. So both have copious amounts of things out there for us to read, books, research papers, case studies, so do look them up. Robin Alexander, when I read A Dialogic Teaching Companion, he outlines the neuroscientific research which suggests that between children between the ages of birth and 3 and 4, and then again between 3 and 4 and 10 and 11, that's when children have the brains and the capacity to acquire language, and that's when it is the strongest. So when they're from birth to 3 to 4, 3 to 4 to 10 to 11. So primary age, early years, foundation stage age, is when their capacity to acquire language is the strongest. So Robin Alexander and Lauren Resnick are two pieces of research I'll be drawing upon. And Robin Alexander defines dialogic teaching as talk which harnesses the power of dialogue to stimulate and extend pupils' thinking, learning, knowing, and understanding. And that's slightly different from oracy, and we'll talk about that in a moment. In his book, A Dialogic Teaching Companion, Robin Alexander makes justifications for developing children's talk in school. And what I thought this linked really well to is if you are in the explore phase of your journey with oracy, this might help form a vision for what kind of talk you want in your school. And there are 8 justifications in total. I think I've only listed 6, but I'm just going to take us through them now. So the first justification is talk for thinking. It's crucial to get our children thinking as we talk and exchange thoughts. That's how we learn. Talk for mastery. So here we can outline the talk structures specific to subjects, which enables children to internalize that subject-specific language, that disciplinary literacy, allowing children to become masters in that subject. We've got talk for communicating. And yes, it is mostly through speech which we communicate, but there are other ways that we communicate our thoughts and our inner feelings as well. Robin Alexander talks about talk for relating, and this links to the Vygotskian idea of the social formation of the mind. Talk is, by its very nature, collaborative. And there are many times in the day where pupils do engage in solitary tasks and solitary thinking. And we want children to be able to build relationships and allow children to feel very confident in doing that. We've got talk for engagement. So democratic engagement, and Lauren Resnick talked about our pupils being accountable to their community. Sorry, just skipped ahead. Accountable to their community. So talk impacts the learning of others around them and children knowing the impact that they have on others. And through that talk for democratic engagement, we've also got talk for acculturation. And that helps us understand what we have in common with those in our community and in our culture. And it develops a sense of belonging. And this links really closely to the work done at St. Matthew's. And then we have talk for teaching. So well-structured talk provides us with the opportunity to probe understanding, assess progress, and give meaningful feedback. And talk for teaching is great for us as practitioners. And in a dialogic teaching companion, Robin Alexander really gives clear sentence structures, question frames, which we can then use in our everyday teaching as teachers. So I mentioned that the talk for democratic engagement, talk for acculturation, really links to the curriculum offer we provide for the children at St Matthew's. And I'm going to just really briefly touch upon this. Sonia Thompson, our head teacher, has wrote at length about this, about our curriculum. And at St Matthew's, the emphasis is placed upon building reciprocal relationships with our pupils. And we as a school, we want to learn from the child, their family, their culture, their heritage, and begin to tap into the funds of knowledge. And Sonia, our head teacher, very regularly refers to the work done by Louis Moll, who talks about that reciprocal relationship we need to build and the funds of knowledge children already have when they enter our classrooms. So it's a two-way learning street at St Matthew's, and we rely upon the ability of our children to therefore express themselves. In a time where we are not the only system that's grappling for our children's attention, we've got to really provide the opportunities in our classroom for our children to think with the knowledge that we provide to them. We know that memory is a residue of thought. And if we want our pupils to think with the knowledge that we are teaching, then they have to have and co-create some learning through talk. So we just want to empower our children through the curriculum and through talk in the curriculum. And we know that that's what will make them successful. So in Robin Alexander's Dialogic Teaching Companion, he lists some repertoires which are tools for our arsenal for how to develop talk. And one of those repertoires is questioning. And in some research carried out by Ted Ragg in the 1980s, teachers were recorded that 67% of their questions invited recall or simple deduction answers. And I know that the research is from the 1980s, but what came from that was the catalyst for how can we manage our questions as teachers so that we pose the right kind of question at the right kind of time. And in his book, Alexander talks about the management of questions, and he says about how we can manage the processes and procedures of which questioning is a part. So, for example, we might be posing a question to our children and see that the talk rules that we have in place aren't actually being adhered to. So we can manage that procedure by reminding them. We can say, can I just, children, remind you of how we agreed to handle this discussion? So it's referring back to the procedures we've got in place. We could also manage our questions and the rate of which we are asking our questions by allowing pupils some thinking time. And thinking time signals then to the children that this question is worth thinking about. And in his book, Robin Alexander makes the link that thinking time is linked brilliantly with those authentic questions, those open-ended questions that we can pose to our pupils rather than a closed recall, which of course has its place. Closed recall definitely has its place. So what I do then like about this repertoire is then it goes into the purposes of our question, and it tells us as practitioners, if you want an answer like this, this is the question you need to ask in order to facilitate that. For example, if we want to initiate talk, then we can pose a question which asks and elicits facts or reasons. So we can pose questions like, why did? We can also elicit observations, and that's to help initiate the talk. Well, what did you think about this? Probe is obviously when we want to know the thinking behind a response. And again, Robin Alexander lists question frames that we can ask. We also might want to ask a question to expand And that helps build upon each other's answers and sustain and develop a line of thinking, which is really key if we're trying to build an answer in the classroom. There's also a really great blog by Tom Charrington linking to his walkthroughs on how to cold call and whether that is your aim, whether you want to elicit a response, probe. So do give that blog a read. So this is where that building of an answer, that expanding, is where Alex Quigley's ABC response worked extremely well. So A stands for yes, I agree with, because. B, another child can then build upon that answer that A has just said. And then a different child can challenge C. They can challenge the responses that are out in the classroom at the moment. And children having that framework to work from is really crucial, and it gives them a good crutch, good scaffold to scaffold their talk. But not only do we need to be able to ask questions, we need the children to own that questioning process, because we want them to ask questions. And I don't mean just asking questions to check something or to say, have you got a ruler? I mean, children need to own the process of questioning to make things make sense for themselves. So in guided reading, Layers of Meaning, Wayne Tennant talks about the purpose of questioning and the importance. I'm just going to read it to you. Questioning. Pupils pose and answer questions that clarify meaning, promote deeper understanding of the text. Pupils then can generate their own questions about a text in order to check their comprehension. And we know that strong readers pose questions naturally. But of course, to make the explicit implicit, we have to teach it first. And that's where the guidance documents come in from the Education Endowment Foundation. So we can see that dialogic talk can take place in guided reading, for example. In the guidance report on your left, we've got metacognition. And here in this guidance report, it talks about the need for children to self-regulate their learning, and we've got to give them the strategies to do that. So the learning focus in a lesson could be to generate questions and clarify meaning of the text. And that could be through us openly wondering or saying, I'm not sure about something. And we know that this is a reading skill. We want children to clarify at the point of reading, because it shows that they're engaging and actively thinking about the text they're reading, and it allows them then to activate any background knowledge they have. So we're not aiming to always reach the answer through a discussion. If it's an open-ended question, then that links with the exploratory side of talk, that we want talk to take place that's deliberate, but not necessarily correct. So moving into the evidence base from Lauren Resnick now. Lauren Resnick is an educational psychologist who has made notable contributions to the cognitive science of learning and instruction. And her work kind of builds upon the understandings made by Vygotsky that talk is a social formation of the mind. And Lauren Resnick says that without talk, our knowledge remains static and unused. Disciplined practice of talk is at the heart of it all, is the ability to reason with our knowledge. And she mentions the social formation of the mind. I also touched upon earlier that Lauren Resnick, in Accountable Talk, Instructional Dialogue that Builds a Mind, talked about how talk needs to be accountable. It needs to be accountable to the community, so we need to have respect for who's talking. It's accountable to standards of reasoning, so we need to be able to justify our thoughts and our talk. And it's accountable to knowledge. So when you're talking, it's got to be grounded in knowledge, in fact. And I mean, in the wake of all the fake news, that's such an important skill for our children to have. And she gives a great example of talk moves. So how can I, as a teacher, move my talk? How can I structure my talk so that it allows for that talk to happen in my classroom? And this is an example of talk moves from her research paper, Instructional Talk That Builds the Mind. So I'll just give you like 10 seconds to read this over. Please do pause the video if you want to. Okay, so how might this look then in a classroom? And I actually did this with my children today. This is the frame I wanted them to talk through. And we were just looking at examples and non-examples of fractions. And my talk moves went from partner A to partner B, back to partner A, back to partner B, back to partner A, back to partner B. And it was so powerful. The children, if you were a partner B, you were having to listen to what your partner A said. And you had to summarize that by saying, let me just check. You're saying that. You're revoicing what the child or what your partner has just said. And that is so powerful because children realize, actually, partner A's were thinking, no, partner B, that's not what I meant. And they're having to rework their language so it makes sense to their partner. And that reworking of language is taking place because they're thinking about, so they're memorizing, because memory is the residue of thought. They're thinking about what they're talking about. And it's just, if I could have filmed it and captured it, I would have. So to do this though, to have these talk moves, to have these kinds of conversations, we've got to have talk rules in place, which of course you make with your class. And you can do that using the brilliant oracy framework that Voice 21 and Oracy Cambridge created. What these talk rules do is they allow for a culture of talk, no matter the subject, no matter the prior knowledge. And there's a really great list of what exploratory talk looks like to help you make those talk rules in Fear is the Mind Killer by Dr. James Mannion. And he says, building upon the work of Neil Mercer and Oracy Cambridge, he said that this is what exploratory talk is, where everyone is encouraged to contribute, everyone listens actively, people ask questions, people share relevant information, ideas and opinions are treated with respect, and hopefully we're all nodding, yes, this is what I want from my classroom. But to do this, it requires the children to, of course, be metacognitive. They've got to be thinking as they are talking. They've got to have the confidence to speak, which is regulating their emotions. And they've got to listen actively. And I've made that orange. Listening is not as implicit as we might think. And in order for listening to happen successfully, we need to make the implicit explicit. So it's more of a matter than just talking less. I've read lots around what listening looks like, what it means, the impact of good listeners on their education. And it's clear that active listening is something that I need to continue to work on in my class with my children. And it kind of just made me sit back and think, actually, being the first to respond in a meeting as an adult isn't necessarily the best thing. I really want to listen to what's being shared in the room before I respond. So active listening in my classroom, I talk to the children, and here's just our toolkit, rough and ready toolkit. I've just snapped a picture of it this morning. It involves eye contact, and obviously know your pupils if they can't make eye contact or they struggle. And I just tell them to look around the area of where the voice is coming from. It involves, if you just have a look at the toolkit yourself, it involves being able to repeat your partner's comments or thoughts or commands. It involves showing some kind of reaction. So For example, if a child is reading a poem that is trying to build suspense, I expect my children to be showing me that reaction. If I am saying one of my hilarious jokes, I expect the children to be laughing. That shows me that they're listening. And even slight things like nods. And I talked earlier about how our body language and our communication is not built just through what we say, the words we say, and it's actually built through our body language. So we talk about sitting up and looking like we are listening. Looking like we're listening then implicitly makes the children listen. So we know that, and I'll keep repeating it, that memory is a residue of thought, and that's the aim, to get knowledge embedded into our long-term memory. If children are actively listening, then this will happen. And sometimes you can make this listening literal, and I nabbed this from someone on Twitter. So please, if you are watching this person on Twitter, please let me know who you are, because I didn't bookmark your tweets. But we were tracking who was talking, and what that did was it allowed the children to see how conversations were being built. And I did it with a ball of thread in circle time. So do make it literal for the children. So to ensure the children are thinking, memory is a residue of thought. To ensure that they're thinking, they have to understand how thinking about a specific thing will help them learn better. They've got to be metacognitive. And we know from the toolkit, the EEF toolkit, that metacognition is the best bet for driving attainment in our schools. So what's the link then between oracy and metacognition? Fayaz and Littleton, they say it is through speech with others that we learn to reason and gain individual consciousness. Children need knowledge of before, during, and after the task. And they need to know what is at play when they're working. What do they need to rely upon to have those structures of talk in their minds when they are working? And we've already talked about the way that we can get children to question and clarify as they are reading. And this is from the updated Key Stage 1 literacy guidance document. So we know that we want children to activate background knowledge, clarify things, and synthesize, change their minds as they read. What a lot of skills they've got to practice at the same time. But if we want them to do that, we've got to explicitly teach them how, we've got to explicitly model the language structures, so that when they see a text, and please do pause the video to read it if you want to, that they visualize, that they can ask questions like, well, what do I already know about wolves? That they can then begin to break down that background knowledge and think of how it applies to this text. That they can ask clarifying questions. There's a wolf here that's licking a child. Is that a human child? Because if that's a human child, then wolves, what I know about wolves isn't happening here. He's licking a child. Surely a wolf is going to bite a human child. This isn't a normal situation. That's the process we want the children to go through when they read Into the Jungle by Catherine Rundell. Mowgli, is this the child that the wolf is licking? If so, this child isn't afraid of wolves, and the wolves that I know are carnivores. Something different is going on here. And it gets them engaged in the text. They are thinking actively about the text. Through this because of time. So of course then, we've got to model and provide them with those language structures. I talked at the very beginning about embedding those structures in the mind. And those structures can be so simple as such as, I wonder, I still don't understand, I'm not sure about this. And again, having them accessible for our children is really important. We know also that the breadth of vocabulary is crucial to our children being able to talk. They've got to have vocabulary in their memory to be able to speak. So teaching that vocabulary is very important. But the depth is also crucial too. So Lauren Resnick, Sarah Michaels and Kathy O'Connor talked about the associations that talk strengthen. And when we think about the associations our pupils have with certain words, we know that we can attach new learning onto those associations. So for example, the word eco, the word economical, the word ecology, teaching that in geography for my pupils, that's giving them a breadth of vocabulary. But I need to go deeper and look at the related parts. I need to look at the prefixes, where the word comes from, the etymology, the spelling of the word, the orthography. I need to look at the parts that make up that word, that make it have a different meaning. And if I know that eco is Greek for house, oikos, then I can make sense of loads of things. When Greta Thunberg talks about the Amazon and its lungs are on fire, it's because the lungs are the house. The lungs are the house. The Amazon is the house of our oxygen, is the housing of our oxygen. So we can make lots of links. And for me, reading about the cognitive sciences definitely made me think of the word hook in its literal form. So I want to be able to hook new knowledge onto existing knowledge. And to do that, I've got to teach and talk for mastery. A simple exercise that requires students to think analytically is from The Writing Revolution by Judith C. Hochman and Natalie Wexler. And this can be an oral activity. It's a conjunction exercise, and it's probably the first conjunction exercise you should give your children. Give them a sentence stem and then ask them to turn it into 3 separate but complex sentences. This engages children in focused thinking, and they can think about the relationship between the conjunction they're using and the rest of their sentence. I did it for history. When we were learning about the Anglo-Saxons, I needed to make sure that that narrative of history was clear. So I started with the Romans and went back to their prior knowledge of year 4. And we talked. The Romans left Britain, but the Romans left Britain because the Romans left Britain so. Here, it's important that the content is the driving force. That's the rigor. Students need the content knowledge to be able to do this activity. But this is a one definitely for talk and absolutely for crafting a sentence, a written sentence. Another exercise you can do with your children is when you are teaching history is to make it explicit how you want them to look at sources and being able to think about the reliability of those sources links to so many other areas of the curriculum. It links to audience, it links to purpose, it links to e-safety, fake news, the critical thinking, which always needs to be involved in the learning. And ranking reliability from the historical association is a fantastic strategy to get your children thinking about sources and talking about them. And of course, the criteria you can use is from the History Association. So please do give their website a look. I told you that this would be strategy, taking strategies into the classroom. Another strategy we can use is from Isabel Beck's Bringing Words to Life. And this is a game called Jeopardy. So I'm just about to do this game with Ari. We are trying to retrieve any vocabulary in the background knowledge, incarnation and Messiah, and also have a look at salvation. This is where children have the words and then they come up with, they talk a clue that helps their partner understand what that word is. Not both pairs will have access to the word. Just partner A will have access to the words and they will give the child a clue. They'll give partner B a clue. And then that will help partner B trigger something in their long-term memory to know what the word is. You can do this as a way of assessing children's understanding of vocabulary, or you can do this as a way of presentational talk. Once they have the content knowledge, And once they are able to talk and think about tectonic plates, then that's best served to use the game then. And just as a last strategy, the key thing to think about, don't underestimate the way that you present knowledge to your children, how you collect their thoughts and discussions. The way that we collect knowledge, or the way that we present knowledge, helps the children learn it in that way. For example, the knowledge organizer used to compare the Anglo-Saxons and the Mongol tribe that we're currently studying, I'm going to use a Venn diagram, because when my children talk to me, I want them to be able to talk about how the Anglo-Saxons migrated, but the Mongol tribe invaded and created an empire. There's also the key character list. Quick change of scene. The character list for the reading that we are doing at the moment, Tamburlaine's Elephants, presenting knowledge in this way and being able to talk through the knowledge in this way provides children with a deeper understanding. So when I talk about Rusty, they're going to be able to visualize in their head that Rusty and Kokas are brothers and Port is the wife. So that then frees up space in their working memory so that they can actually concentrate on the skill that I'm trying to teach them, whether that be vocabulary and context, retrieval, summarizing. And here we have a cause and effect map. So the children learn the inputs to something happening, and then from that, learn the effect, the output. This has been a whistle-stop tour of oracy, and I'm so sorry if you feel like it's been rushed, but if you have any questions, please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts, and any challenges, any suggestions, please do let me know. So just to bring us back to the implementation and the importance of implementation before we go ahead with any of the strategies that we are thinking about, or thinking about delivering whole school strategies that you might already use in your classroom, and you're thinking, how do I take this? How do I make it bigger? How do I impact my phase, my team? And the EEF have a perfect document for this. It's called the Implementation Plan Template. So please do give it a look, because you can identify in the explore stage, which is the most crucial, what actually are my priorities? Is talk a priority for our school? If it's not, then what is? And if it is, then what am I going to do about it? Okay. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to recommend a really good blog that I read yesterday, Group Work in Classrooms, Why We Should Never Willingly Say Goodbye. That's the school bell. So please do get in touch. I would love to hear from any of you. Thank you so much. I hope it's been useful. Okay, bye.